Do y'all see me?
Hadn't popped up yet.
No, haven't popped up yet.
I got it. There it is. Yep, I see you.
Yeah,
You're
I got you. I got
Does
you.
everybody see me?
Yeah.
Yep, you're good.
All right. I'm getting feedback that we are good. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Is it 7 o'clock yet? Let me see.
It is 7:04. Rock and roll, cowboy.
7:04. All right, everybody. Thank y'all for tuning in to our Facebook Live, Fishers of Men Nation. I want to thank Al and Dick and all the guys that are that asked me to come and join. I absolutely love Fishers of Men Tournament Trail. Growing up, I had to fish some tournament trails that were on the weekends, on Sunday, and boy, it just I was convicted by it. To be honest with you, I wasn't happy during that time, and I wanted to be fishing on Saturdays. But it is what it is. It happened, and I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't proud about it. Stayed convicted about it all the time. But Fishers of Men Tournament Trail is on Sundays. I mean on Saturdays, and then they have a devotion on Friday night, and just God is all over it. I know Al. I know a lot of the guys that are in the directors and just the people behind the scenes at Fishers of Men. Great group of guys. I have a lot of respect and I think an awful lot of this tournament trail. So I just proud to be a part of it, and thank y'all for tuning in. Anybody who is, I don't have the questions popping up on here. I'm gonna address those later on. So I'm just gonna get into sharing with you guys tonight, sharing about faith and about fishing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 3 tips, 5 tips. I'm going to give you 5 tips on when we get done with here, how you're going to be a better fisherman. And then we're going to try to do a Q&A at the end and take some questions. And uh, I seeing some questions pop up here. So I'm not going to address those right now. I'm going to wait to the end. But 3 tips. I'm going to dive right into the first tip. The first one is keep an open mind out there on the tournament trail. So many times I see young fishermen, veteran fishermen, advanced fishermen. They got it figured out before the tournament ever starts. Everybody now does a lot of networking. They watching YouTube videos, they're checking the weather, they're doing all that, and they have a lot of information before they go into their tournaments, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with being prepared. Uh, Hint for another tip here in just a minute, but keep an open mind. The weather changes, the rivers rise, the water falls, the water temperature changes, the spawn cycle changes daily. So keep an open mind when you're going into a tournament, and don't just because your buddy told you that he's catching them on this point on a football jig in a certain color and certain size, don't base your entire tournament on that pattern. You might get out there and see them out there schooling, or just your intuition, your outdoor. Having it figure out before you ever go does not allow your outdoor instincts to kick in, and that's what you want. That's how you become a better angler. So keep an open mind whenever you go out there for practice or for the tournament. And just because you have a GPS full of waypoints, you've heard a lot of information, you think you got it figured out, keep an open mind. You never know what the good Lord might show you out there. And then that's how you become a better fisherman, because it starts to click and your outdoor skills really grow. And man, that's awesome. So it's neat to watch that process. It's neat to be a part of that process. It's neat to sit back and watch the Lord work in your fishing day, and in your, just for any sportsman, whether it's a deer hunt or anything like that. I mentioned be prepared. That's my tip number 2. Be prepared when you go out there for a day's fishing, a day's hunting, or whatever. As a sportsman, it's very important to be prepared. If those hooks on that old sexy dog are pretty rusty, or on your lipless crankbait, and it's an old bait, you're throwing a rattle trap from 1965. Um, Make sure your hooks are sharp when you go out there. Make sure your trolling motor batteries are charged. Make sure you know what the water's doing. Check the current. If you're fishing on a place that has current, look at the wind, because if the wind's blowing out of the southwest, that northeast bank's going to be awful good. So just make sure you're prepared every time you go out. Bobby Knight, I heard him say one time, Bobby Knight wasn't my favorite basketball coach or anything like that. It's not like, but I did hear him say something to a young group of athletes one time, and it was he shared a tip on there that I thought was one of the best tips that I have ever heard. And at the time, I was an athlete, and I took it to heart, and I played high school baseball, played all through. I played 2 years at Northwest Community College, and then I went on to Arkansas State and finished my career. And I always remember these words. I remember them in fishing. I remember them in life in general. And Bobby Knight said, the will to prepare to win has to be greater than just your will to win. The will to prepare to win has to be greater than just your will to win. So, be prepared out there. Make sure you do what you need to do to get ready for the upcoming season. You can start preparing right now for next May by keeping an inventory, whether it's up here on paper, a logbook, whatever, GPS. Make sure you start being prepared in the future for a situation. Everything that you learn right now, keep it in the hard drive or write it down or put it in your GPS, because it'll help you be a better sportsman. The next tip I'm going to give you guys is, when this is kind of a ledge fishing tip. We're going anybody that knows me knows that I love to fish offshore. And one thing that I think a lot of people make mistakes on fishing offshore is they don't run the gamut with their lures. They may have caught them on a citrus shad 6XD on a point in a certain situation one day. Well, it was cloudy in the current. They were pulling 80,000, and it was probably good. Well, the next day it's bluebird sky. They're not pulling any water. It may be a Saturday. It's slick. Those fish are still there. They're suspended, and you got to do something different to catch them. So run the gamut with those lures. Pick up a football jig if you feel like they're down on the bottom. Check that deal. There's a few baits that I always have to have on when I'm ledge fishing. I have a conglomerate of lures that I will go to in a day's fishing, but my standbys out on ledges is a 1 ounce football jig with a loose ledge jig worm rod, 17-pound Seagar and VizX, and blue crawl or green pumpkin. It doesn't anything bluegillish, crawfishish. That's what they're eating out there, other than big gizzard shad. But a football jig and a 1 ounce, and the reason I like a 1 ounce is because I can be real efficient with it. I can make long casts. It stays on the bottom. I can hop it, and it gives a really good reaction. So a football jig, a swim bait. I like it on about a 3/4 ounce head. I can keep it down on the bottom, or I can reel it up in the water column. I can even get it real close to the top. So I've got to have that, and then I got to have a crankbait. Those are, and then you have to have a spinning rod and either a Nico rig or a Strike King shaky head on there, just for a tough situation. So run the gamut with those lures. And if that doesn't get it, start with the hair jig, the scrounger, and everything. I can go on and giving you lots of baits to try out there, but make sure you run the gamut with your lures. Next tip, You got to be efficient with your time out there. So this next tip is pretty important, and that anybody that knows me knows when I do seminars, I try to share this tip every single time because time on the water is very important. Make sure you learn to pee and fish at the same time. That's right. You got to make sure you learn to pee and fish at the same time. Now, I don't know if there's any women watching. Lindsay, she's behind the scenes with Fishers of Men. She can give y'all a seminar on that. I'm not going to go there. So y'all check in with her on that. But as far as men, stay proficient out there. There's times whenever you can be in that process, slow down, whether it's a Strike King Ocho or something, and it just kind of sinks down and you pick up and you got a fish on there. I've weighed a lot of fish in during that process. So be efficient, learn to pee and fish at the same time. And I will say that is kind of a joke, but I really wanted to get your attention because the next tip is really the reason why I agreed to come on and share with you guys tonight. And that is you need to hang out with Jesus as much as you can. You need to hang out with the man that made all the fish in your life as much as you can. Many people tell me my granddad passed away at 98 and a half years old. And I spent a lot of time with my granddad. He made his living off the land, commercial fishing, trapping, whatever it took. And he passed, so he was a great outdoorsman. And I run on to the small town that he lives in now. I run on to people a lot of times and they say, man, you're just like your granddad. Your granddad spoke awful high of you and you act just like him. Your demeanor is just like him. You can see, Jesus in your life like your granddad. And I spent a lot of time with my granddad, walking those ditch banks, trapping, catching mink, coons, muskrat, possum, whatever got in there in our nets. And I learned a lot from him. Well, I'm going to read you a passage in the Bible. It's one of the most popular stories in the Bible for a sportsman because it deals with fishing. It's a very popular one. It's probably been used in Fishers of Men a gazillion times. But I'm going to read this fishing story and I'm going to show you how Peter hung out with Jesus and how it made a difference in his life. I'm going to go to Luke chapter 5, very familiar passage. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake Gennesaret and saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out and washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answering said unto him, Master, we have toiled all night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I'll let down the net. So, here's Simon. Jesus is traveling through the land. He's spreading the good news. People are following him. People are attracted to him. And here he is standing by Lake Gennesaret. He's seen Gennesaret. He sees a couple people down there washing their nets. He goes down there, starts hanging out with them. And the fishermen, they hang out. They want to be around him. People are drawn to Jesus. And he left teaching the people and he jumps on the front of the boat and they're probably talking fishing and Jesus is right there on the front deck of Simon's boat. I can't tell you how many times I would love to have Jesus on the front deck of my boat. We could make a lot of money, but Jesus is not hanging out a whole lot on the front deck of people's boat. But however, he's hanging out with him. We can hang out with him. We can hang out with him right here. And Jesus, it's making a difference in Peter's life because it said it's earlier in the Bible, it talks about how Jesus had healed Simon's mother-in-law, but other than that, there wasn't a lot of recordings of Simon hanging out with Jesus. But here, he's got him on his boat. They're out there fishing. He goes out a little and he tells Simon what to do. Now, there's been a lot of times. Can you imagine? Let me back. Can you imagine what Simon is thinking? Simon's a professional fisherman. He's pretty good. He makes his living fishing. And here this guy steps onto his boat, and he's going to tell him what to do. There's a lot of times when my wife calls me in the tournaments in the past, and she's saying, "Now, honey, I've been watching the weigh-in. I've been hearing a lot of people talk about a shaky head. Did you try a shaky head?" Did I try a shaky head? I'm a professional fisherman. A shaky head's like a banana split to a bass, but it doesn't always work. So when I didn't catch them in a lot of these times, yes, I tried a shaky head, a biffle head, a bug head. There's so many. I tried everything. I ran the gamut. And some days you just don't catch them. So I just think about that whenever I read. Whenever I've read this passage in the past, I think about old Simon Peter. Jesus is sitting there telling him what to do, but yet he trusts him. He's hanging out with him. He likes him. He's making a difference. He feels it. So he says, "Nevertheless, at thy word, I'll let down the net." And by hanging out with Jesus, by listening to him, it made a difference in his catch. Guys, I can't tell you the reasons for sure why I have been successful in tournament fishing. But I feel in my spirit and in my heart that hanging out with Jesus has made a difference in my life. It's made a difference in my friendships. It's made a difference in my career. It's made a difference in a lot of things. And yes, I truly believe I have been successful as a fisherman by hanging out with Jesus. I've been unsuccessful as a fisherman by hanging out with Jesus, but Jesus has always provided. When I say I've been unsuccessful in fishing terms, but yet so many times traveling all over the country, I've never had. May have one this next time, but I've never had an accident. There's never been a time whenever I'm out fishing and I've had to be called back home in an emergency with my family, and those things are very important to me. So yeah, he's blessed me along life's way, and I truly believe that you can be a better fisherman by hanging out with Jesus in so many ways in life. Uh, there's a lot of guys that fish. I know of, whether it's a smaller term or just going out fishing, and they have a lot of weight on their shoulders and a lot of weight in their heart because they may be struggling with addiction or so many. I don't want to go into different sins that people struggle with, but I've got enough of my own that I need to worry about Mark. But I can say this, that whenever I go to a tournament trail, I don't have the weight of addiction and things like that on my shoulders because I've tried as best I can to hang out with Jesus as much as I can. I'm not perfect by any means. I struggle each day, but yeah, I truly believe that the best tip that I can give you to be a better fisherman, you go out this weekend and you enter into a tournament, you hang out with Jesus a lot between now and then, you're going to have peace in your heart, you're going to have protection, you're going to have a lot of the things that people without Jesus really don't have. So I challenge you to put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. And the Bible talks about there's one thing that's required of a steward. There's one thing that is required of me to be successful. It's not how many sponsors I got. It's not how many social media followers I have, how many people I got watching a YouTube channel. It's not, those things are not what Jesus says for me to be successful. It says there's one thing required of a steward, and that he be found faithful. And that's what you can be. You can be faithful to Jesus. You can put your faith and trust in the Ephesians 2:8-9 says, "For it is by grace are you saved through faith." So simply you can put your faith in the grace of Jesus and talk to him, hang out with him. It will truly make a difference in your life. So God bless you all. I appreciate you listening to the message. Hope it challenges you a little bit to hang out with the man that made all the fish. Hey, he knows where they all live. It can't ever hurt to hang out with Jesus. He can help you at any given time. So yeah, we're gonna. I guess we're gonna take some questions now. Have a Q&A. I'm gonna call these guys. I'm not seeing it on my phone, so I'm gonna call the guys that are behind these scenes, the scene here, and I'm gonna see if they. So he says, nevertheless, as that word. I'll let that on the head. Y'all stay with me. We're going to take some questions here. I'm going to let these guys, I don't see them on my screen. So I'm going to, hanging out with Jesus while listening to it. It made a difference in his case. Hey, y'all. Can y'all hear me? The reasons for sure why I have been successful in turtle fishing, or but I feel in my spirit and in my heart that hanging out with Jesus. I'm going to look on here real quick and see if I can figure this out. If I can't figure it out, we'll come back. All right, y'all. I'm not sure what's going on here. Y'all stay with me if you got any questions. I'm going to give this just a couple more.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah.
Am I on? Or what?
Yeah, you're still on.
I'm still on. Hey, everybody.
It's dragging a little bit. We're probably a little bit behind your live.
Yeah, I am. Do you see any questions that I can go ahead and be addressing?
No, I didn't see any actual questions, but people were making a few comments. But I think they missed the question part. I think if you hit on that again, people will take some stuff on there.
Okay. All right, let me try it. I'm going to stay with you right here. Folks, we're going to have a Q&A session right now. If any of you folks want to have questions that you want to ask, fire them away. I should be able to see them. I'm just not, maybe I'm not seeing them because nobody is asking any. I don't see it. Can y'all hear the geese in the background? Not seeing any pictures, y'all. I mean, any questions, y'all. I guess that means nobody's got any offshore fishing questions or no fishing tip question, anything like that. I'm going to stay on for just a couple more minutes and let Danny and Lindsay and Dick and all the people behind the scenes right now catch up to me. My video is faster, the live part evidently, than on this computer than what y'all are seeing. So I'm going to hang out here just a few more minutes. Danny, you got anything?
Yeah, I'm still with you. Brady's sending you a question right now. What is it, Brady? Best couple of coordinates for a good spot on Lake Chickamauga.
Okay. I got a question about somebody wanting some coordinates. I'm on a couch. I don't have a GPS handy, and I've got a pretty good memory, but it's not that good that I remember waypoints. So can't really share any about Lake Chickamauga. Don't have them in the hard drive.
Tell us a little bit about your bluegill success and what makes for good bluegill fishing just for fun.
Okay, we got a question about bluegill. What what I like about bluegill fishing, what makes it fun to me. You know, I grew up watching a cork go under, and with a cricket and little ultralight, and that never goes away to me. I still love it to this day. Now, I do like fishing bluegill places that have really big ones. So if there's anybody out there that has a bluegill lake that's got those giant, whether it's copper nose or shell cracker or what have you, uh, send me an invite if you need a partner. I'll be glad to come and join. Have boat and ultralight, and we'll travel. So I just love the bluegill fish, man. It's just something that bluegill and crappie are my favorite two things to fish. Outside of tournament fishing, I don't go bass fishing. Yeah, I just really don't. I love to crappie fish the most, but I really do love to bluegill fish. I love to eat bluegill. So yeah, that's why I like it. Any good tips for Chickamauga? If you Okay, I'm starting to see some now, so I'm gonna let you go, Danny.
Okay, cool.
Veronica Sewell Ward says, what's your most cherished memory as a fisherman?" Um, wow, I have a lot, but I guess I would say that a fishing trip that I got to share Jesus with one of my really close friends, out on the water, and him praying to receive Christ right out there on the water. I've had wins, I've had a lot of things, good success in fishing, but seeing the somebody's eternity change, then that's way more important than anything that I could do. Yeah, as a my flesh loves the wins, they love the money, all that kind of stuff. But I one of my good friends putting his faith and trust in Jesus, knowing that he's going to be in heaven for eternity. That's my most cherished memory, I guess. Good fishing tips for Chickamauga. The spawn ought to be starting to wind down there, and they start to get out on the points and ledges and bars and things like that. So get out there and wind something around. Probably a swing head with a Strike King Rage Bug on it would probably be my choice. You can find schools that way. Uh, Use your electronics if you can, and if you got them, and get out there and hunt and peck. And they should be starting to wind down here over the next couple weeks, and get out there on the ledges. Right now, you can still catch them on shallower bars and gravel bars and stuff like that. Favorite lake to fish? Um, I love the Tennessee River. I love the Great Lakes. Both of those two, probably Lake St. Clair and Lake Pickwick, are my two favorite that I love to go to. If you could choose one go-to bait, what would it be? It'd probably be a Strike King shaky head. I can catch them on that bait, high in the water column, on the bottom. They eat it all year. It's just a really good bait. So probably a 3/16 or 8 ounce Strike King shaky head with a 7-inch KVD perfect plastic green pumpkin finesse worm, and that's like a banana split to a fish. How many poles do you have rigged when fishing a tournament? Probably 25 in my rod locker, and I'd say 8 to 10 on my deck most of the time. I'm having trouble with hooking up when throwing a Cinco. Any suggestions on what to do? I'm using a 5/0 wide gap hook. First thing you need to do is switch from a Cinco to a Ocho, and they'll eat it a little better. That was kind of a joke. They'll eat both of them. They like Cincos too, but I do love an Ocho as well. But if you're using a 5/0 wide gap hook, I don't throw a 5/0. I throw a KVD grip pin hook, because those type baits will slide down your hook really bad. And I like the grip pin, how it hooks on a mustad. But be sure, and where that eye is, and you got your bend, it comes back and it faces down towards that, below that eye. So lift that point of that hook up to where it's above your eye just a little bit. This is the eye of your hook, and this is the point of your hook. You don't want it down here even or below. You want it just raised up just a little bit. So take your pliers right behind the barb. Make sure you don't push your barb down, and lift it up just a little bit, and it'll really significantly increase your hookup. What do you do first when you're on a new lake? Pray. Hang out with the man that made all the fish and talk to him and ask him where. I'm smiling and I'm laughing when I'm saying that, but I'm dead serious when I'm making that comment, because I truly believe that God can help you with those type of things. But give you a peace, give you an understanding, give you a bone, whatever you want to call it, a sign. But probably the first thing, look at where you are in the spawn cycle, and if it's midsummertime, I'm going to look at the water temperature, and if it's not cool, and if it's it's kind of muggy and the water's hot on up in the high 70s, 80s, I'm getting out off of the bank. And if it's shallow or they're spawning, I get shallow. So look at what cycle the fish are in their migration, and then make good conscious guesses after that. Favorite ledge fishing bait? Probably a 1-ounce Strike King tour grade football jig with a Rage Crawl trailer. Green pumpkin or blue crawl, those colors are my absolute favorite. I can catch them really high. I can rip it off the bottom, or I can catch those fish that are down in the water column. Four-aught straight shank hook. No, that's a KVD grip, wide gap mustad KVD wide gap grip pin hook. Favorite search bait for ledge fishing? Probably the football jig or a 6XD. What do you do in training and conditioning? The thing that I do the most, probably to stay in what shape that I'm able to be in, is run. I love to run/walk. I start out. It's a 30-minute deal. I try to do it 3 times a week. But I've got a state park over here, and I look at my watch and I just take off. And for 30 minutes, I'm gonna, I walk or run until I hit 15 minutes, and then I go back towards the truck, which is, because that's about halfway. But I try to mix in, 2 to 3 minute runs in that cycle. It just all depends on if you're eating right and getting good sleep, whether you can run 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. And and you work. And there's some days whenever you're eating right and resting really good that I can go on to run, more like 10, 15 minutes. And then I get it up, and some days I'm able to run the entire 30 minutes. So yeah, running and walking is what I really like to do. What constitutes a ledge? I know a pretty basic, but I've never done it. Thanks. A ledge basically is offshore fishing. That term came from the Kentucky Lake area. It's just because offshore on Kentucky Lake is the ledge of the river. It's the Tennessee River it's the Tennessee River that runs from above Chickamauga to Nickajack to Wheeler to Wilson to Pickwick to Kentucky. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. I left off Gunnersville in there, but make sure you get offshore, and that's basically a ledge. When it's out off a pond, if you like to fish a pond or a small reservoir or whatever, out off of the bank, whether it's a hump, a creek channel, anything like that, that's ledge. So it's away from the bank fishing. Ever fish near the pyramid on the Big Mississippi? I've cut my teeth over there. I've jumped every beaver dam and every hunting club and everything over in that area. I've been in there fishing. Probably a lot of them I shouldn't have been in, but yes, I have fished all over. We used to ride under the Mississippi River and take our spotlight and turn it up there, and where the barges can hit that sign to turn the Mississippi River lights off. I've been out there a bunch of times.